Welcome back to Adobe Live. I'm Hillary Niemer, UX designer on XD, here with...
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm one of the product managers on the XD team.
Sweet. So I think today the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the contest winner from the last 2 days design challenge, and then we'll go ahead and jump into it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. So congratulations, Matthias. You are our winner. Here is your Behance page, so take a look at that. We'll jump into looking at your submission. So here we have a space travel page. Can scroll down and learn a little bit more about the about space travel. You can see, what it costs, the pricing. We've got some really awesome space images in here, super clean color palette, really nice scrolling, and then we have a super fun drag to travel. So you can select this rocket here and take it to space.
Pretty awesome, yeah.
Super cool. And then moving it into more options here, you can select where you want to go. I think we have Mars today. So you're going from Earth to Mars. You can pick your departure date. I think we've got December 10th. And then here, this is super fun. You can go ahead and add how many people you want to go, and it updates here. And you can, again, go back down if you make
This is actually pretty awesome. I wish this was an actual site where you could go for
I know.
So clean and so minimalistic. Makes life so much more easier.
Wish that every travel page was like this. And then I think when you confirm, we've gone to infinity and beyond.
That's awesome. Actually, I like the red and white also.
Yeah. I feel like, the color palette is awesome. You've used some awesome animations, really nice use of drag here. Yeah. And a super clean homepage. So congrats, super awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Congratulations.
I think your prize is a year subscription to Adobe Cloud, so awesome. Have fun with that. All right.
So what do we have planned for today? Let's see. So I know one of the things that came up yesterday, which we didn't have time to cover, was some of y'all reached out asking, how do I work with responsive resize and components? So we'll probably do a little bit of that today. We'll talk a little bit about responsive resize. Couple of other things that were also pending were the assets panel and seeing how you can reuse colors, character styles, and components, seeing how you can make global changes. And then in the prototyping side of things, we have some fun stuff today. We'll do voice-based triggers and speech playback. So if y'all are not familiar with how to prototype with voice, we'll cover some of that today. What else was in prototyping? So we had voice and speech playback. We did drag yesterday. We did auto animate yesterday. And then we have a little feature sneak for the June release. So we'll touch upon that in a bit. So why don't we start off with maybe responsive resize?
Sounds good.
Okay. So for those of you who've used XD, responsive resize was a feature we shipped last year at Max. So it's been a couple of months now. And what this feature enables you to do is quickly resize your content. And if you've used other tools, traditionally the way you go about doing this is you have to define constraints or relationships between the object and the container. At times you also even have to create a container. But with XD, we sort of took a very different approach. We built responsive resize in a way where it just works out of the box for you with your content. So let's look at a quick example of how someone could use responsive resize. So
While Jonathan's doing that, another just a note, one of the reasons responsive resize is so important is with the introduction of components, it's increasingly more important to start to understand, how resizing your component can have an effect on layout and syncing. So it's a good review for components as well.
Yes. So this is a classic example of something we've all had to resize at some point in time while working. So let's say, for example, I have my date out here, and then I have the rest of the system icons out here, which I'm having a hard time selecting. All right. So typically what happens is I'll take all of these. So this is one group, another group, another group, and this. I'm just going to make sure they are all aligned correctly and spaced out correctly. Okay, and then I'm just going to create a big group out of this, right? So now in the past, when you had to resize this, let's say, you decide to make this on a larger artboard, what's going to happen is the first step you'll end up doing is like resizing your artboard, right, to whatever size you require.
Right.
Then the next step is you decide, I want to resize this entire group to make sure it's aligned on the left and the right. Now, typically this is the behavior you would get while trying to resize. All your icons get skewed and they get stretched out.
You get a lot of battery.
Yep, you get a lot of battery. And this is definitely not the intent of what you are trying to achieve. So what do you land up doing? You land up double clicking, jumping into the group, selecting each of these objects individually, and then like sort of moving it over again over here. And once you move it, making sure you get the padding right, the alignment right, again sort of having to realign things. So it's a couple of steps. It takes you at least 2 or 3 steps to get to that end state, right? With XD, we sort of focused on solving some of these problems, and in a way where you don't have to learn to use the tool differently. So I'm going to try and do that same workflow once more, except what I'm going to do now is basically I'm going to turn on this little toggle switch you see here in the property inspector. So what this essentially does is it turns on the responsive resize for groups. Now I'm going to go ahead and start resizing this group. And what you'll notice is as I'm resizing this group, the timestamp remains fixed on the left. The objects on the right are proportionally spaced and they move without you having to actually manually resize each one of those, right? So this is the beauty of responsive resize, where what it does is it figures out when you're resizing something, what are the objects, what are the relationships between them? Are they grouped? Are they not grouped? What is the distance between them? Are they closer to the left edge, the right edge? So there's a whole bunch of heuristics where XD does all the heavy lifting for you to make this really simple, right? So in one simple step, I was able to, resize that. Now, if you notice, the first step I had to do was actually resize my artboard. But you could even simplify that in XD. So I can turn on this responsive resize on the artboard itself. And now when I resize, you can see the content also resizes with it. So this literally reduces that entire workflow down to one single step for you.
Super cool.
Now let's look at a couple of more sort of, complex examples of this. So let's see, what do we want to pick from here? Maybe let's go with this. So here, if you notice, I'm going to get rid of the notch so it's a little easier to see what's happening here. So you've got an artboard. I can open up the layer panel so you can see how this is structured. Just a piece of text, got a group with some menu icons here. Got individual icons floating around here. Got this other group out here. Just some random layers. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is just try and resize this artboard by turning on the responsive resize and see what happens first. So I'm going to go ahead and resize. And you can see that for the most of it, it kind of got some parts right and some parts just they're awfully wrong, right? You have two options at this point. One is you could actually double click and manually move stuff around. But in case of working with a component, you would ideally want to make changes in such a way that they impact all your instances. So in order to do that, the first step you want to go ahead and do is, in this case, I've got this group. Okay, this is grouped. I'm actually going to start regrouping a couple of elements just so that I organize them, in a better fashion. So go ahead and group this. I'm going to group these two.
So the idea is you're just trying to group things based off of kind of how you would imagine you'd want them to stay when you resize.
Exactly. So now when I try doing this once more, you can see that again, I got most of it right, except that the spacing between the cards is completely a mess. At the same time, there's something going wrong with this icon out here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and I want to figure out what's going on in this icon here. Okay, so it looks like this is fine here. So I've got a group here, got another symbol there. And in this case, I want to try resizing that. So for some reason, it's trying to resize the inner element, right? So here's where you have another feature for responsive resize. Now what I can actually do is drill down, select a specific element, and if it's not doing the right thing, simply turn this on and switch from auto to manual. And inside a manual, what I can do is actually change some of these controls and say fixed width, fixed height, and see if that actually gets me one step closer to what I wanted. So once I adjusted those constraints, now when I resize it, you can see it no longer does that, right? So you have this flexibility of leveraging responsive resize where we try to do most of the work for you. But sometimes when it doesn't work out, you always have that flexibility of saying, hey, XD is not doing the right thing for me. I'm going to switch from auto to manual, where I can sort of customize all of these, right?
Right.
And for those of you who are comfortable working with constraints, this is a great way of just managing your constraints across your components.
So it sounds like two ways, as you start resizing, if you see that it's not resizing how you want it to. The first way is to kind of go in and look at your groups and see how things are grouped to make sure that they respond to the way you want them to. And then the second way is if it's really not doing what you want, you can switch over to manual and make sure to set them exactly how you want them.
Exactly. So that's sort of a quick glimpse of how responsive works. Now there are a couple of other really interesting things you could do with responsive resize. So for example, here I have a component, and if you notice when I resize this button, everything stays centered within the button. Now that's just an example of how responsive resize is actually working with components. So responsive resize is actually, think of it as the new default behavior for how you resize objects in XD. Whether it's a component, whether it's a group, it really doesn't matter. Responsive resize will help you resize that content. Cool. Now, for some of you, y'all have been requesting for features like a smart distribute property or something which quickly allows me to resize content without having to create a repeat grid. Well, guess what? You can actually do all of that in XD as of today. So if you select, I'm just selecting 3 individual groups over here. If I open up the layer panel, you can see they're just 3 different components. And because I have responsive resize turned on, when I resize them, they resize or they shift proportionately. So this allows me to, even take a bunch of selections like this and just resize them to increase the spacing between them. I don't always have to create things into a repeat grid. Now, if I did make this a repeat grid, the behavior would be something like this. So here you can see you get individual controls over the spacing. If I jump in here,
you have it every 3.
Oh yeah. So if I jump in here, I can resize this. But if you didn't want to create a repeat grid, you could still just select all of these and resize it. Now, one of the things we often get asked is, oh, does everything need to be in a group or wrapped inside a component for it to work with responsive resize? The answer is actually no. So here what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ungroup this whole thing. So you can see in this case, now all it has is one shape, I'm actually going to ungroup this as well. Oops. So you've got one icon, one text layer, one background shape. I'm going to marquee select all of these and start resizing. And you can see now it still tries to achieve the same effect, but there are a couple of things that are not going to work out. So in this case, because there's some vector assets inside, I'll probably have to go in and customize how it works. But yes, you could actually benefit from responsive resize even if things are not grouped. But essentially, we'd encourage you to group your content so that responsive resize actually does the desired outcome. One other interesting use case for responsive resize that I thoroughly enjoy demoing is when it comes to repeat grids. So let's look at this quick example out here. Now, over here, if you notice, actually, this one does not have a repeat grid. I do know one of these have a repeat grid. Oh, there we go. I think this one does. Oh, okay. So go ahead. I'm going to take this out here. Okay, so I'm going to try something that I've actually never tried before and see what happens. I'm going to turn on responsive resize for this whole artboard. And I'm going to try and resize this artboard. Okay, so for the most of it, the only thing that actually did the right thing was the footer. But so let's try and fix this. So what happens over here? I'm going to switch back to manual and check what's going on, right? So it looks like this is pinned to the top and to the left right edge. Probably don't want fixed. Let's see if removing fixed height helps solve this.
So I think the image size is small as well.
Probably as well, right? So here's another thing. You can always just drill down and fix things along the way. Now this stuff remained pinned to the left, which is great. If you notice that my header perfectly resized, this one got skewed a little bit, and I'll probably have to manually fix that. This is interesting. This is actually an intersection group, I'm guessing, or an exclude overlap. So it didn't do the right thing. But if you noticed one thing, when I resize this artboard, you notice how the repeat grid, instead of just trying to resize those cells, it's adding new number of like rows, columns to it, not rows. And that's because we are aware of what you're trying to resize. So when you're resizing something that contains a repeat grid, rather than just resizing, each individual cell, we add more columns to it. So that really helps you expand your content versus just, resizing each cell to scale up for that.
So responsive resize is going to get me most of the way there, but as a designer, I'm usually going to need to go in and maybe adjust some things, especially as you get more and more complicated.
Right. And the whole idea of the way we built responsive resize was to really think of what do you spend the most time doing in XD or in other design tools, and what are better ways or faster ways of achieving that same end result. So the repeat grid was one example where we focused on, that whole workflow of having to duplicate elements, then proportionally space them, then deciding to make changes and update each of those. So one of the things that really helps is like using the repeat grid to repeat content. Another example of that is resizing. We know we spend so much time trying to resize something, make sure things don't scale or stretch and they remain in the right corners or the right edges. So again, responsive resize was a feature where the team spent a lot of time testing, researching different options, and actually working with the community to get feedback on whether this helps or not.
I think there's a couple question keep coming in. Is Jonathan and Hillary part of the XD team? We are both part of the XD team. So we have, I'm on the design side and Jonathan is one of our talented PMs.
Yes, so we both work on the XD team. I specifically focus on the prototyping features. Hillary works on, a lot of the design system and design features as we have. So yeah, we are on the team.
Yeah, but you make a good point. So a lot of the times the features that we're focusing on are features on how we can kind of take a lot of those like nuanced, repetitive tasks that designers have to do. So, I think with with repeat grid, the team noticed, people copy and pasting things a lot.
Yeah.
And so the task there was, how can we eliminate the need for that and help them adjust that spacing really quickly, and same with responsive resize.
Yeah. And one of the things, I actually tried this the other day. I was like, I copy pasted this keyboard layout from one of the UI kit files, and I realized like the keyboard layout didn't match the device size. Now I know that there's probably another UI kit somewhere for that device, but I was a little lazy and I just wanted to quickly add a keyboard, right? So I tried something really crazy, which was like resizing this, and it totally didn't do the right thing. But that's an example of where, sometimes responsive resize does what you intend, sometimes it doesn't. For the most of it, it's going to try and get you at least 60 to 80% of the way, right? And that's sort of what we focused on, just helping you reduce the number of steps it takes to resize content. Awesome. So do we have, I'm going to move on to the next thing, but if you all have any questions around how responsive resize works in XD, questions around how to use it, feel free to post your questions in the comment section. I'll answer them as we go through the rest of the stream. Awesome. So what's next? Should we do the assets panel?
Yeah.
All right. So for those of you who are not familiar with how the assets panel works in XD, we actually introduced this several releases ago. And what the assets panel allows you to do is really manage your colors, your character styles across your entire document. But in addition to that, it has a lot of workflows which allows you to make edits at a larger scale, right? So the first step over here is, how do you add something to your assets panel? So for the sake of simplicity, I'm actually going to create a new document here so you can see this from scratch. Okay, so it actually brought in all my linked symbols because I copy pasted. So I got rid of those. Yeah. Okay, so imagine you're designing something from scratch and you want to use the assets panel. The first thing is, let's look at how you add colors to the asset panel. So to add colors to the asset panel, all you have to do is actually select a layer. And in this case, I want to make sure I've selected the right layer. Okay. And then you'll notice that the plus buttons get enabled in the panel. So I go ahead and click on plus, and you'll notice that it extracts that color for me.
Cool.
I'm similarly going to go ahead and do that over here again. And I could keep doing this for every single layer. Or even better, I could select the whole group, click on plus. Even better, I could select the whole artboard and click on plus. Now, if you get the idea, you can actually select all your artboards in the entire document, click plus once, and we'll extract everything for you.
Super cool. An easy way to kind of see what your color palette is and to be able to manage those and then even quickly change some things.
So now let's look at what you can actually do. So before we jump to that, couple of things I wanted to highlight. The asset panel actually has two views, a grid view and a list view. You're currently in the list view, which is why you can see the hex value next to each of these. If I switch over to the grid view, I get the hex value inside a tooltip. And we'll talk a little bit about why we have two modes later. Now, in this view, what you notice is when I get to gradients, we actually show you the start and the end state of a gradient value. And if your gradient actually has an alpha, or even if a solid fill has an alpha, we show you the alpha value in brackets, in parentheses, so that you understand there's an alpha associated with it. Now, another cool little trick out here is you can actually right click and do a whole bunch of stuff with your colors. So the first thing you want to do is, let's say you decide you want to reuse a color. So I'm going to bring in a completely different screen now. I'm going to get rid of these components. All right. So I've got a different screen and I decide I want to recolor this layer out here. So all I have to do is select that layer and click on the color in my assets panel to simply apply that color across it. Then if I decide I want to use this as a border color rather than a fill color, then I can simply go ahead and right click and say apply as border or apply as fill.
Nice.
All right. So before we lose some of the questions, I want to make sure I answer them. So Eric had a question. What if you want to change the color styles after you added them to the panel? Do you have to delete them? Absolutely not. So let's say that's the case, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply this color over here as well. And then I suddenly realize, I'm like, well, I actually want to apply this same color across all of these orange values. Or I decide I want to change this yellow color across all of them. Now, typically the way you'd go about doing this is like select each one, change the color from here, select each background, change the color from there. With XD, we've actually simplified that. You can right click on a color and say edit. And what's about to happen is as you change the color here, that color reflects across all the instances in real time. So this makes it super simple if you've used a specific color value and you decide you want to be able to reuse it and change it across all your different components or your instances on your canvas.
This is a super cool feature I usually really like to use when I am taking my wireframes from like low fidelity to high fidelity. So you have maybe your grayscale, you can add it all to your color palette and then go ahead and start adding in that color and just see your design transform really quickly.
And one of the things that happens very often is like you'll do something like this and realize, oh, well, I have another purple out here, right? And it's like, I just need one, I don't need two. So the simplest thing to do is I usually go ahead and I say copy this value and then I right click on this one and I say edit and then I just paste it out here. And then what that does is it essentially merges the two colors for me. So if you notice now I have a single purple inside my assets panel. And if I right click on that and I say edit, you'll notice that all the instances of purple are now in sync with each other. So this happens quite often, while designing, you'll accidentally have a couple of different shades of gray. And then you realize, well, that was never the intent, but now you need a really quick way of correcting those. So you can do that using the asset panel. It's really, really simple in that sense. The other options in the assets panel are also things like being able to rename your color, copy the hex value. Or if you're in list view, you can actually double click on the label itself to rename. And that's a simpler way of just, renaming your color. So let's say we want to call this hot pink. So you could totally do that from here. Now, one of the other things you can also do is like rearrange your colors by dragging them. And if I go back to my original document, you can see how I've actually organized all of my colors. And I've simply done that by just dragging them between and dropping them on different positions out there. So I'm going to undo that. Go back here. Now, here's something that, a lot of us experience while designing. We look at a specific color and we are like, I'm not sure which color this is in my assets panel. Or a more realistic use case is maybe this document where you are searching for something and you realize, which specific color is this from the panel, or where is this specific purple in my panel? You can actually simply right click and say reveal color in assets. And what that will do is actually select that color for you. Now, the reason this highlighted black was because I actually picked another layer on top, which has black.
The group.
So I'm going to delete that just so that you can see this.
I think we're actually at our time for chat and win. So
okay,
make sure you sign in.
Let's look at the chat comments and then we can come back to this.
Yeah.
All right.
So while that's going, those who have just joined us, some of the things we've talked about today so far, we went over responsive resize and how to set the rules for that, and how if the rules are not responding the way you want to, some good tips and tricks on how to go about fixing that. So definitely check that out. And right now we're just doing chat and win, and then we'll get back to talking about the assets panel.
Sounds good. All right. So here you can see I want to figure out where this purple is, or which which shade of purple from my asset panel maps here. So I can right click and say reveal
we've
color.
We've got our winner, Naveen Kumar. Congratulations. The team will reach out to you for more information. Your prize is Sticker Mule. I think you got 100 stickers. So
awesome. Congrats, Naveen.
Cool.
Okay, so back to where we were on the assets panel. So let's say I want to figure out where this, which specific, purple is being used out here. So I can simply right click on that object and say reveal color. And you can see it actually highlights that for me in the assets panel. Now, another way is sometimes you want to figure out, hey, where exactly is this yellow being used, right? So you could right click and say highlight on canvas. And what that does is it actually highlights all the objects in blue. This might be a little hard to notice, but it's actually highlighting the last square out here, which helps me understand that, something is using that specific value. All right, so going back to where we were, now let's look at character styles. So character styles also sort of work in a very similar fashion. You select a text layer, you click on plus, we extract the character style for you. And then similarly, you can keep doing this. So I'm selecting another layer. I've extracted that. Now, if you notice something weird just happened, when I selected one text layer, it created 3 character styles. And the reason that happens is because within this, if you notice, there are a couple of different styles. I have some part of my text that's underlined, some part that's bold, and some part that's regular, right? Or I've changed the letter spacing and some. So what it does is XD figures out, what are the different styles you've used within a text layer, and we generate individual styles for you in that case. If I decide I want to select only this piece of text and add it, you can see it only adds that. If I switch over to grid view, I can still see a better preview of it. If I switch to list view, it sort of shows me the properties or the name. So I could even rename these to being H1, H2. Oh, here's another little trick. When you're renaming something, just hit the tab key to take you to the next row without you having to jump like back and forth between each one.
Oh, I didn't even
Yeah, you could actually do that. So
Super cool.
the tab key allows you to quickly like jump to the next one, or shift tab takes you the other way around. So you can easily rename your character styles. And then everything we just showed you with colors works also for character styles. So you could simply right click a character style, say edit, and then make changes. So in this case, let's say I zoom out and I decide to edit this. Here you can see as I'm changing it, it reflects on my canvas. If I had more than one artboard where I was using this, it would reflect across all of those, right?
I love this. It's super cool. You not only have all your text properties, but you can also change the color at once.
Yeah, and this makes it super easy because imagine having like 50 artboards and wanting to try out how this design looks across all 50 of them. Doing that from the character style, like from the assets panel using character styles makes it so much more easier because you're not having to do this individually across each text layer that you have. So again, the character style makes it really, really easy to work with, text, color, and components. And then this is something we already covered yesterday, but you could actually create components from the asset panel itself. And then you could do things like drag it out to swap or drag it out to create more instances. All of that works. Similarly, you can right click, edit on master, or highlight on canvas, where you can see how it highlights the thing with the blue box. So these are some of the key workflows of the asset panel. Now, a few things I want to touch upon as to why do we have 2 views, right? So if I switch over to the grid view, let me add one more component, a couple of more things over here. So oops, just pick the background like this.
So for those of you who haven't seen the last few days, we've touched on components the last 2 days, so we probably won't touch on them too much today, but they're a new version of what symbols were, which basically introduces a new and flexible override model. So you have your master when you create the component, which if you make a change to the master will propagate to all of your instances. And on your instances, any change that you make will be considered an override. And so if you make a change to the master that your instance has an override, that change will not propagate. So it'll just kind of maintain the things that are still in common.
Yeah. So a couple of interesting things out here, like why do we have 2 views, right? A grid view and a list view. Now, if you observe in the grid view, what we've actually prioritized is being able to preview your colors, character styles, and symbols. So when you look at your component section, you can see larger thumbnails, and makes it super easy for you to recognize what your components are. If you look at the character style, we actually try to render the character style right there, so you get a preview of what it would look like. And with colors, you just have really large swatches that you could preview.
Right.
If you switch over to the list view, it's sort of tailored for a very different purpose. What we've optimized for out here is the ability to see see your custom naming that you've assigned for each of these. So in this case, if I've assigned names, those names are easily accessible out here. So if I'm a designer who works with components, where I usually remember components based on their naming convention rather than how they look, then it's more easy to use the list view. Plus, the list view allows you to rename and sort of also reorder, so that makes life so much more easier. So that's sort of the flexibility you have while working with the asset panel to switch between grid and list view, which makes organization and previewing and reusing so much easier. One other little thing is you can also resize the assets panel. So depending on if you have a really large wide monitor, maybe you can resize this to have multiple columns, so that way you're not having to scroll a lot to get to your components. Because that tends to happen with like maybe larger files like this, where all I want is like to see most of it in a single view. So I'd probably take it up to like 4 columns if I'm just working on like one side of it.
Cool.
This is a small MacBook, so it doesn't make sense, but otherwise you could totally have a large screen where you could adjust this.
Another cool thing is, if you don't have the space, but you do know what you're looking for, and you are one of those people who named all of your assets, you can actually search for it, right? So if I wanted to find like the H1 header, I can just type that into the search panel.
Exactly. Yep. So that's sort of a quick overview of what the asset panel is. And we touched upon this again a little bit yesterday, which was the CC library window, which allows you to bring in assets and content from other Creative Cloud applications. And you can see how we've sort of aligned the experience across the two. So you have a very familiar interface to work with, regardless of where your content's coming from. So that's sort of a quick summary of how assets work in XD.
Should we do a quick demo of linking to a document?
Sure, we could do that as well. Oh, that actually reminds me, we missed out one complete thing.
Yeah.
So we've got a little search bar out here on the top where you can actually filter out the asset panel to only show you colors. Let me do this in the larger document where there's a whole bunch of stuff here. So you could actually filter out to colors, or filter out to only character styles, or maybe just components in that case, right? It actually gets even more powerful, because now what I could do is search for very specific things. Like if I search for the word, let's say orange, it'll actually pull out everything that's named with orange. Let's take another example of this. So what if instead of that I search for a hex value? So let's say I go with this. And what you notice right now is it's not only pulling out colors with that value, it's actually searching for character styles with that value as well. So it makes it super easy when you're searching for something where you could, manage all of that from one single location. Again, so if I go ahead and search for the word icon, you can see how it filters out all the icons for me. So that's sort of how you balance out, you want to make sure you name your components, name your colors, character styles. And that will make it super easy when you want to search through content. All right, so what's next on the list for today? For those of you who just joined, we did a quick recap on responsive resize. We spoke about the asset panel and how you could use that. We have a couple of more things planned out for maybe prototyping. So I know we were going to demo how voice prototyping works and give you a quick demo of that as well. But before that, maybe do we want to talk about like XD as a presentation tool?
Sure.
So some of you all mentioned this on day one around being able to use XD as a tool to create presentations, and that's something that we internally within our team do quite often. We use XD as our primary presentation tool. In fact, today what we want to do is really talk about how we've been using XD to create our presentations. maybe some tips and tricks on how you could do that as well. So Hillary, what do you got for us today?
Sure. So I'm going to go ahead and actually share with you guys one of the initial presentations we did for components.
Mm-hmm.
So as we mentioned earlier, components was just released this May. So I'm going to kind of take you through a little bit of our process and kind of a high-level deck that we did when we were conceiving components. So in here, like, we've got kind of an overview of the deck. The team has created a little bit of a template to just kind of help us get started when we're in like the beginning phases, which we call the discovery phase. So for components, what I've done here, oops, sorry, jumped ahead. Let me do full screen again. So for components, we were taking a look at our phase one. So I kind of just start here with a title page, and then we want to set up our presentation and just let those who we're presenting to know a little bit about what we're going to be sharing and the intent of the presentation. So here it just says that we're taking a look at components and a little bit about why we're going into this. So we're just going to allow users to create variants through flexible overrides. And it says, who has been working on it. So here we have design, product, and engineering, and then what phase we're in. And lastly, the feedback that we're looking for. So as designers, when we go into these reviews, if we don't set up what we're looking for, the meeting can go in all different kinds of directions. So if I'm bringing something in that's maybe not high fidelity, we haven't, put a lot of thought into copy yet, we don't want people getting stuck on that. So we just upfront want to let our audience know, like, we're just looking at the overall approach.
Right.
So that's what we're doing in this presentation. The other thing is kind of just setting up, like, what are the use cases we're looking at, and kind of help set it up so that the people who are watching knows, who we're presenting to knows kind of what we're getting into. So here we're looking at some uses for components. So this is kind of a redo from what symbols is, but essentially we are looking at how designers can reuse things across their designs. And some of the reasons for reusing is to help the designer keep consistency. And then the other thing is just to help with efficiency. So when a designer makes a change to something, it can propagate across all of their instances. And you can see here to our right, we just kind of have an example of how designers will create these things and use those across multiple screens.
One of the things I was going to mention was, like, yesterday, if you tuned in, we spoke about how you could create a prototype and share feedback. And what we often do is create prototypes out of these decks, and we share them so you can leave comments and, like, gather feedback with your stakeholders. So it's like we create a presentation and then we create a prototype out of it so you can collaborate on it as well.
And that's a really good point. Oftentimes when we create these presentations, we will send out a prototype link to the meeting beforehand so that we can collect any feedback beforehand and sort of have an idea of the questions that are going to be asked, so we can make sure that we can answer those questions in the meeting. It helps really set up the meeting so it can go nice and smoothly and not get derailed on other topics, and some of it we can even answer before the meeting itself. So this is a really good way to collaborate with your stakeholders. And then, jumping into, kind of some of the changes, we were looking at introducing our overrides. So we wanted to, talk a little bit about what overrides were used for. So the idea behind overrides is flexibility. As we saw the way people were using symbols, we know a lot of people were breaking them to create small changes, to make maybe another state. And so that's kind of one of the key things we were looking at as we scaled out this feature. And then the next thing was just kind of taking a high look overview of what that new model was going to be. So we've talked a little bit about it, and I'm going to just run through it quickly since most of you have already seen us use components. But the idea here is that we'll set up our presentation with the XD app screen actually, and you can see some things may not be exactly right. We're missing the toolbar on the left, and the share button up in the top right are kind of deactivated because we really want to just kind of highlight the things that we'll be using in this presentation. And I believe that I mentioned this yesterday, but Talon and Sam have actually published some templates around this. So that you guys can kind of take a look at designing features for XD as well.
We got a couple of questions, so before we lose them, maybe we try and answer them.
Yeah.
So I think Naveen had one question. So Naveen's question is basically when you go to design specs and you get the measurements on canvas, they usually have a pink value that we use, which may sometimes conflict with your design if it has a similar value, right? Naveen, that's something we are aware of. The team is sort of trying to figure out ways in which we can solve that. I would definitely say go upvote that on user voice. Unfortunately, I don't have a workaround of which can help you in that. But yes, that's definitely a known issue on our end that we need to go resolve. And then a couple of other questions around presentations. So the first one is, what is the final presentation displayed in the PDF files? So Samuel, what we're actually showing you is basically the artboards inside of XD. We wired them up and we're using the preview window. So we've not even exported this as a PDF yet. One of the better options rather than PDF is to publish a prototype link. And I think that'll answer one of your question again later on, which is how do you pass this off to someone else, right? So if you publish this as a prototype link, you could easily send that link to someone and say, hey, here's my presentation. You can leave feedback on it. You can, leave comments, annotate things. So sort of, just leveraging that same prototype and review workflow, but more in context of it not being a prototype, but a presentation. Tim had a question around, can you go full screen on Windows? As far as I'm aware, Tim, yes, you can. If that's something that's not working for you, just ping me on Twitter. My handle is Jonathan Pimento, and I'll look into it for you.
Yeah, Jonathan, that's a good point. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about inviting people to your document, creating those links that you can share out. And so what we like to do is create a prototype, and sometimes that's high fidelity with animation, sometimes, and like in this case, it's just really low fidelity dissolve because we're just kind of looking at like an overview of this mental model. And so what we've done is just kept it really simple so that people can stay focused on the content, and then we'll send that out to stakeholders, just looking for general feedback on the overall mental model in this case. Cool. So here we've kind of set up like a flow of how you would create a component in this new model. So you select your object, you hit Command K. As you can see, we've also kind of set up the document to show like how a user might use this. So I've set up, kind of a place for all of my components on one artboard and my designs on another. So when I hit Command K, or I can also go ahead and add it actually in the asset panel, but that's the keyboard shortcut that we use to create components. Your first instance will now become your master component. So you can see in this presentation, as we go through the prototype, we kind of have these annotations at the bottom to help the user know the viewers know what's going on, so they can, if they're reviewing this on their own, if it's a small change, like in this case, it was just going from blue select handles to green, they get an idea of what's happening. Cool, so we have our master component, and now the user can copy and paste instances throughout their design. So you can just see, we really just take you through a flow. Here, we tell the user they make a text override, and that this no longer propagates to all instances. So just highlighting some of the changes that we're making in this model from the previous model. And then to make changes to master, you can select your master, make an update and see those changes propagate. Cool. And then, so now that everyone has kind of an overview of that change in the mental model, we go a little bit more deep into the different kinds of overrides that you could make to components.
And I think for some of y'all who asked us this on maybe day 1 or day 2, do we design XD in XD? I mean, this is it. You're literally looking at some of the work we did where all of this was actually designed right inside of XD. We sort of use our own tools to design our own tools, and sometimes it gets tricky, but it's always a fun experience, I feel, where like you're trying to design the blend mode feature inside of XD without blend modes.
Exactly.
And it gets super tricky at times with that. You're like, well, I want to, like when we were designing the auto animate feature, it was like, you wanted to show examples of how things animate in XD, but you're actually trying to design the feature that will help you do that. And it's some of that really helps us empathize with like, what are the workflows, what are the pain points, and just helps us, build better experiences for the tool.
Yeah, so for example, in this case, I'm trying to design overrides without overrides. So every time if I had created a symbol, I would have to break the symbol to make these overrides. So that really helped us as we kind of look at use cases through designing, decide, what actually needs to go into this feature.
Hey Samuel, I think I know what's going on. So if you're in prototype mode or in design mode, you need to select an artboard and then bring up the preview window. So the reason Hillary can only see one, like you're literally looking at Hillary's preview window, which is made full screen. So Hillary, if you don't mind just maybe escaping full screen so that, and then maybe opening up the preview window for them to see from where you triggered it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and close it. So here's my presentation. I have whatever slide I have selected. When I hit play, it will start there.
And you can go full screen from this point on. So that's how you kind of present it. That's what we were using to present all of this.
Yeah, and again, just so you guys can see, these are just artboards that I've gone ahead and we've put our XD app frame onto it, which is a component. And we then, you can switch over to prototype mode and wire them up.
Yep.
Cool. So just to quickly run through the last bit of the presentation, just looking at those override categories. As we were designing, one of the first things we thought about was, and one of the most requested overrides was to be able to resize your components. So the use case we looked at here is that the user wants to scale their design for a larger screen. So they've gone ahead and rescaled that design, but the button's too small. Now they want to resize that component. So you can select the component and resize it. Now with that resize, they've also decided they want to make a structural change. So in that case, that's adding in an icon to this button. So you go ahead and clicked into your component and added an icon. And then the last change is a style override. So I want to go ahead and remove that fill and change the text color. So this is kind of just showing the flexibility of all the different kinds of changes that you can make to a component. And we like to start with like a really simple use case just so that as we're presenting it, people can wrap their head around this new model and just something that's really straightforward. And then we like to, maybe jump into some more complex examples so that they can see really the flexibility of what we're introducing. And so here's just like some examples of things you would be able to create with components. So you can see in the top, you just have some style variants. Maybe you've changed the text, you've changed the color. In the bottom, maybe you actually want to create a navigation where it has different states selected. And then on the right, you have these two very different layouts where you have something really small and you may have had to remove some things. Or in the top, add some things. Or sorry, the larger one, add some things. So yeah, so it's kind of an overview of how we do our presentations.
That's awesome. Hey, Tim, Samuel, you guys are absolutely right. On Windows, you do see the title bar even when you go full screen. Unfortunately, that's a part of how Windows 10 defines applications. Like you can always see the title bar in full screen mode. That's something beyond what XD can control. but I do have a workaround. So if you still want to use XD for presentations, what I would recommend doing is create the presentation, publish a prototype link, and then view that link in the browser. And using that, I'm hoping the browser goes full screen without the title bar. But if that's another workflow, you could possibly, skip using the preview window and just use the prototype in the browser as a way to sort of present it without that.
Yeah.
Yes, the preview window functionality between Mac and Win is different. The reason that happens is Windows 10 has specific, platform guidelines and certain things that they define, which is beyond what we can control. So for example, being able to record your prototype on Windows is something the team researched a lot. And the guidance we got from, the Microsoft team was to leverage the game recorder mode, right? Due to privacy issues, we could not add our own recorder. So some of these things are sort of, unfortunately tied to the platform itself, and they're not really things that we could change from the XD side. But again, please upvote it on user voice. We work closely with our partner teams like Apple and Microsoft, especially around bugs around platforms. So at some point, if this is something we can support, we will actually support video recording on Windows if that's a possibility.
Yeah.
But till then, yes, you can still preview your prototypes in the browser. That will help you get there.
Yeah.
Looks like Howard's joined the party now. So, all right. Before we move on, I did want to show you one more example of using XD as a presentation tool. So we switch over to my screen now. I want to show you something that I put together last year. Now, last year I had to speak at the Layers conference that happened probably around the same time as right now. And I decided to actually do the entire talk using XD. So this was my actual presentation that I created inside of XD. You can see they are just regular artboards. And then what I did was when I went up on stage, I basically took the preview window, I went full screen. And these were my slides. Like I literally used XD to talk about all the work I've been doing at Adobe, what are the different tools I used. And yeah, like by the end of the whole presentation, when I actually exited the full screen mode, I was like, by the way, this whole presentation was in XD. I wasn't using Keynote. I wasn't using, PowerPoint or any other tool. So you can actually leverage XD to do a whole bunch of stuff, especially around storytelling. I think at the heart of it, it's really around storytelling, whether it's your own designs, whether it's a presentation, whether it's just a concept you're trying to convey or, help others understand. XD is that lightweight tool for you, right?
Yeah.
So this was just another example of where I actually had a whole bunch of screens. My talk was all about how we work together as an XD team. So just different slides, mixing it up with text, images. Oh, this is the XD team. Oh, and that's me on another stream. That's so meta. All right. And then one last thing I did want to show you was, the fact that this is a prototyping tool, you could actually mix up a bunch of different triggers, right? So if you notice, what I have right now is a simple tap trigger, but you could also wire up your artboards and instead of tap, pick keys and gamepad. And that way you can assign things like your left arrow, your right arrow, your up arrow, down arrow, or even hit enter. Like all of these keys are things that you could assign. So it becomes super simple with the May release to create presentations that require a keyboard, right? And I think Tim just called that out as well, which is with keyboard triggers, the experience is even smoother. You're absolutely right. Samuel, yes, you could even use a gamepad if you want to go all crazy and like show people how you control your presentation with a gamepad. But that's absolutely something you can do with XD. One last thing I did want to call out about, how one of the use cases that I showed some students back at university for them to use XD was we created an interactive quiz inside of XD. So here's an example of where it's just a couple of different artboards, and I'm actually going to take you through the quiz to see how that works. So when I go to the full screen mode over here, so you have a button that says start quiz. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you notice how I animated to my next screen. Now I have a bunch of I have a question here with a bunch of options. Now I can either choose to click on one of these options, which goes to the right or the wrong answer. So in this case, let's say I deliberately click on the wrong answer, right? So it takes me to the next screen and
skip this question.
oh, I forgot to mention that. Each of my screens actually have like a voice playback or
Wow.
speech playback. So if it didn't come through, it basically said the answer was incorrect,
Nice.
try again. So I can say try again, which takes me back to that screen. And then I click on the right answer now.
That's correct. The answer is iron.
So what I'm doing is I'm actually mixing up tap with like speech playback to create this quiz. And then I'm just using a bunch of different wires to go to different places. Now let's say I go to the next question. This is another fun little one where instead of tap, the answer to this is you have to drag it towards the right answer. So you could either click on this and drag it here,
Nice.
or then you could drag it in this direction. So let's say I drag it over here.
That's correct. The answer is a pig.
So
That voice.
again, this was a very simple example of like, for students at a university, they wanted to use XD to like convey their concepts, convey the ideas. And then one of the things we discussed is like, oh, you could actually create a bunch of, pop-up quiz and things like this. And then for the last one, this was really,
You
The-
ready?
this was fun because we used a time-based trigger where if you don't answer the question in the next 5 seconds, it just takes you to the next screen and says you ran out of time. And then the way we're doing this is the question is actually a voice, it's a voice command, and you have to answer back using speech or your voice. So let's try that. Canada.
That's correct.
So now you
Answer is
could
Canada.
So now you can see how I actually created this little interactive quiz using tap triggers, drag triggers, time triggers, speech playback, voice commands. So just another little idea, sometimes things like we've seen our customers use XD in ways we've never imagined. And this is one of those. Like when you showed XD to a student who does not have a background in design, but was basically studying business and management, they still felt XD was a fun tool to be able to put together slides, design certain concepts because it was a lightweight tool. And then this quiz became, one other use case out of it.
Tim says, you people have way too much fun with XD. And I totally agree. But I love seeing these things come out, like the interesting ways in which people use it. And this is a perfect example of how you can have fun and keep your audience engaged in presentations too.
Absolutely. All right. So with that, I think we have a couple of more things left we want to cover today. So the first thing is we want to talk a little bit about voice prototyping maybe. Do you want to cover some of my favorite plugins and extensions that I use? So maybe talk a little bit about extensions. We also want to sneak one of the June features.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone's waiting for that part, so we are going to get there. In the meantime, please don't forget to submit your portfolios. We'll be reviewing them in some time from now.
About 25 minutes from now.
Oh, that's 5 minutes from now?
25.
Oh, 25 minutes from now. Okay, you have 25 minutes. All right. Let's see. Before we go there, do we have any questions? We are experimenting with creating games in XD today. That'll be fun. I'd love to see what you guys create. Samuel was eating pixels for breakfast this morning. That's interesting. What's Howard up to?
Half my day is having fun with XD. No wonder I don't get any work done. That's why we love your content, Howard.
So Naveen had a question as to, I'm very curious how is the drag trigger animation done. So Naveen, we covered that yesterday during our live stream, which shows you how to create a drag trigger. But I'm sure Howard's gonna quickly post a link by the time I finish this sentence to basically help you sort of see how you can create drag triggers in XD. He has a bunch of really good resources and videos and content that you could actually go through. Creating drag triggers is super simple in XD. All it takes is like one wire and a start and an end state for your drag. So definitely have a look at some of Howard's content. That should help you get there. Howard, stop sending hearts. Start sending the links. But yes, I think we all love Howard's content and the great work he's been doing with the team. And he has a lot of fun too. All right, so there we go. Howard's got the link posted there 3 times. Yes. All right, awesome. So now let's talk a little bit about extensions. Maybe did you have any favorite extensions?
There's a couple.
Before I show off mine.
There's a couple that I feel like are kind of just like base level, should always look into.
Okay.
Lorem Ipsum one,
Okay.
obviously. Makes it super easy to just like throw in some dummy text and keep working and come back and fill in that copy later.
Do you know what it's called?
I think it's just called Lorem Ipsum. Let's see. While you're looking, I can also talk about some other ones. There is a plugin that allows you to kind of help arrange your artboards. I think that one's super nice, especially when you're prototyping, because we will, if you hit the next arrow, the next one that is in order will be the one that shows up. So that helps, you not have to manually go and do that. What else is there? What's some of the ones that you like?
Tim saying the stock plugin is also great. I'm actually going to cover that, Tim. That's actually, some of my favorite plugins as well.
Did you end up finding the Lorem Ipsum?
No, I couldn't find that, but I found the other ones that I was going to cover.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Here it is. So I don't have it installed in my public build. So you would just, go ahead and install it, and then from there, as you're working, if I make some text, I can go ahead and go plug in Lorem Ipsum. Sorry, I have to click into it. I can go ahead and, I don't know why it's not working right now.
Maybe I think you gotta have you gotta have text in it, maybe like something.
I don't think so, not usually. Let's see. Maybe I'm just like... Okay.
By the way, Hillary is a designer, don't worry. She does know how to place content inside a text box.
I don't know why it's not working at the moment, but...
No worries.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe let's look at the few I use actually. So switch over to my screen now. And if you'll notice, I have a couple of artboards out here. Quite often you realize you want to localize these artboards, right? So for example, you want to create variations of this in different languages. And this is a tedious process, just trying to convert all of your text or translate it and several steps. So one of the things I really love doing is selecting the artboard, heading over to my plugins, and then picking this plugin called World Ready. So with World Ready, this is a really fun plugin created by the folks at Adobe, where it allows you to translate your content from one artboard in multiple languages. So the first thing you'll notice is I'm actually going to go pick a couple of different languages, like maybe German, let's say Japanese, and maybe Turkish. I've never tried that. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and click on the Translate tab over here, and then click on the button Translate. So let's see what happens now. So it is working. I didn't think this through. I don't know how long it's going to take. Oh, it's done. Okay. So in one single click, I actually managed to get this translated to, I'm guessing this is German. Actually don't know the difference between simplified Chinese and Japanese. Oh wait, no, this is Turkish. Sorry, this is Turkish.
Looks like Turkish.
Okay. This one's German, and then this one's Japanese. And you can see for the most of it, it tries to do a good job. Now there are certain things that translate, certain things that don't translate. But, if you are just trying to do a quick check on your design to see if your text areas are large enough to account for translations, or if things are going to overflow, then you could easily do that just using this plugin. So here you can see how easy it was for me to quickly get a sense of, oh, in a German translation, does this make sense? Here you can see my buttons are falling apart. So that's a quick way for me to make sure I correct some of my content so that it accounts for all of these things.
Yeah,
So that's,
as we're designing with like padding and stuff, it is important. It's a super cool plugin to help you just kind of see how, if someone in Germany were to pull this up, what's breaking, and to consider, how you actually design those components.
Right. And then this is another one we spoke about yesterday, but Undraw is one of my favorite plugins because with this, it has a whole bunch of different illustrations that I can use for my projects. I can switch the colors right over here if I want to. And then, so let's say I decide I want this little bird. I click on it. It's already copied it to my clipboard. I hit done, come back here and hit paste. And I'll actually get that right away as ready vectors that I can start working with. So Undraw is another pretty cool plugin that I love using. I've in fact used it in my project out here as well. You can see I've used some of the illustrations and then added more objects on top of that, making it super simple to work with. Let's see what else we have. Google Sheets is another really powerful one where you can actually pull in content from a Google Sheet inside your design. I probably won't demo that now, but you could totally use that. Change case it used to be my favorite one.
Now we have
now we actually support case transform inside of XD, so you no longer need that. I think Samuel mentioned Stark. Stark's another really good one. It helps you simulate for color blindness and contrast check. So this is a great way to make sure your designs are accessible. So here, let's see what happens when I try this on maybe something like this. So I go ahead, say check contrast, make sure your artboard isn't a gradient or an image. Okay, so maybe that was not the best example in this case. All right, let's do this. Let's check contrast. Boo, I've done a pretty bad job. So you can clearly see it gives you all of those inputs right away, lets you know what the contrast ratio is, clearly tells you what the issues are as well. So this is another really handy plugin that I love working with. Let's actually install so many. Rename its selection, add hamburger icon. I don't even know what that is.
We should test it.
Let's try it.
Yeah. What happened?
Something happened. Wait, what if I select the artboard and then I click on, where is it? Add hamburger icon.
I don't know. maybe paste. See if it's went to your clipboard or something.
Nah, it's the same thing. Now, great. Now I have a hamburger icon somewhere over here where I can't spot it. Either ways, there's a whole bunch of plugins you can find under the Discover Plugins option here. Like every day the plugins change. There are always new ones coming in. For those of you who want code export, there are some plugins that promise you can export code. I haven't tried them. You can try them. User journeys. There's UI. Actually, I have UI faces. Why don't we try that one?
And just like a note on collaboration, there are some things where you can integrate with Slack, with Jira.
Yep.
So definitely check those out. They can help you streamline your work and work with developers and things like that.
So one of the other things I love doing is using the UI Faces plugin.
Howard said the only thing that plugin did was make me hungry.
Yes, it did. So another interesting one is basically UI Faces where you can choose the source. This is actually pretty powerful. I never realized you could pick the source. You could change the demographic of which specific group you want to get images out of. Let's say I check box both of these. I want neutral expressions.
Yes.
And let's randomize it. Apply faces. And there we go. Is it? Wait.
Can you zoom in?
Is that Wonder Woman?
I feel like I
think we
should know
got
who that is,
Gal
but I
Gadot.
don't.
Maybe it's her.
Yeah.
Anyways. So again, that's a really quick way of getting, UI faces right inside your design where you don't have to go back and forth.
Super cool.
It looks like someone tried to answer my question. The hamburger icon is the icon where the three horizontal lines under each other. A menu icon. Yes, but we're trying to find it where it inserted it on my canvas. Like Howard said, all it did was made us hungry. All right, we have something to... What's Howard saying? Oh, okay. not going to sneak any of that. What other plugins do we have? So we have a couple of more minutes. Let's see, Undraw, World Ready, user testing. So like Hillary mentioned, there's, apart from plugins, XD also has integrations with other tools. So Slack, Jira, user testing is one. Airtable is another one we integrate with. So there are a whole bunch of plugins and integrations that work with XD. Definitely go check them out. You know, you could use XD as a part of your existing setup as well. And then last, let's try one just for kicks.
Cool.
What happens with a calendar plugin? Please select an artboard or an object that is directly in an artboard, excluding objects. All right, I'm just going to select an artboard and see what happens. Calendar. Ooh. Okay, so I'm going to pick English, width height 30, month. Wait, we are going in June, right? June. And then I want like Monday, Tuesday. Okay. Do your thing. Oh my God. This thing,
Cool.
I can't believe that. Oh, and let's see what happens when you resize it. Okay, maybe let's not do that. That was not a smart idea. But
Easily fixable.
yeah,
Just go
easily
in there
fixable.
and-
If you drill down in here
Yeah.
and you like group everything up,
Yeah.
let's just see if that worked. Nah, I'll probably have to group each row column, but yeah, I mean, this is a quick way of getting a little grid. I wish it wasn't actually a repeat grid, so you could like keep changing stuff to it. But yeah, these plugins are fun. There's always a plugin for like some workflow that you've not thought about, or like some workflow that XD currently does not support. So that makes it super simple to take care of all of that. All right. And then, should we sneak one of the June features now?
Why not?
Are you guys ready? Should we do it now? I'm going to wait back for someone to say yes in the comments. All right. Let's look at something that's coming soon. All right. Are we ready?
Yes.
Are we ready? Okay, so the first thing, now let's actually, I'm going to go ahead and design something just for kicks. Maybe,
There we
why
go.
don't we take,
We've got the delay on now. So pretty please.
all right. So I'm going to take this massive bunch of stuff, bring it over here into my little special magical build. I'm going to paste all of my interactions. And now one of the things, oh boy. Okay, ignore the fact that my images got messed up because this is a special build which is not publicly available. So one of the things I want to show you is like when you go to prototype mode in XD, let's say you select something, you pick a wire, you get this little pop-up. Now you decide to make changes from like a tap trigger to a drag trigger or something else. It's pretty simple. But what happens if you want to make changes across all your artboards? So let's say you want to change the trigger across 50 artboards. How do you go about doing that today, Hillary?
You select each one and do it all individually.
So you keep going through this process of clicking each wire, getting the pop-up, changing it in the pop-up,
Yeah.
and going back and forth, right?
Yeah.
Now this takes a lot of time. So we decided to make this so much more simpler in XD.
This happens a lot to me too, like when I'm creating a presentation and wait till the end to wire everything up, and it's the
Exactly.
same trigger for all of them, and you have to go and do it each individually.
Right. So now when you switch over to the prototype mode with one of the new features coming very, very soon, you will actually have a new property inspector inside prototype mode. So with the property inspector, you can essentially select a wire, choose whatever you want from the right-hand side, select an action. In fact, this is even more powerful now. You can select multiple wires, which you could never do earlier. So now you can see I'm actually selecting 5 individual wires, and I can actually change their trigger in one single click and change their destination in one single click. So if you notice what I'm doing right now is easily changing triggers, actions across all of my artboards really, really quickly. So think about creating those prototypes where you have like over 50 artboards and being able to make all of those changes really streamlined for you. This makes it super simple to work with like large files, large number of wires, large number of artboards. And again, going back to some of our presentation use cases, you could totally change all of this, all of your presentation triggers in a single click. So that makes it super simple. One of the things we often get asked is how do you delete all these wires? So you can simply select all of your, select all of the triggers you have like this, and then, pick tap, and then let's say you pick transition. You can actually go ahead and pick destination none, and that removes all the wires for you.
Nice.
So again, the prototyping, the property inspector and prototype mode is going to be really, really powerful to allow you to manage all of your interactions. And if you're reading between the lines, this is actually going to enable us to add a lot of more capabilities to prototyping mode in the coming months. So this is just the start to some of the more awesome features we are waiting to add.
So you can see Alex just posted Sneaky in there. I just want to call out that he was the designer on this. So thank you to Alex.
Yep.
Everyone's super excited.
And then for those of you who have been asking to enable fixed position inside prototype mode, you can actually do that now. We in fact have an option to fix elements or fix their position when scrolling right inside of prototype mode. So again, sort of, helping you prototype really quickly. I'm sad because we're going to miss this little white guy, this little small pop-up out here, and we have a fixed property inspector going forward. So again, that's a quick sneak peek of what's coming in the June release. And yes, stay tuned. There's a lot of more features coming along, in the June release as well as the following months. Let's see, do we have any questions?
I saw nice, but what about states?
States. So the state of affairs with states is that the team is actively working on states. So Eric, the way we go about building stuff out here is like some of these features are really big features. Like components is one of those, features where we took a couple of months, but we sort of built it in a way that scales for the future, right? And that's the way we are also imagining how states would work in XD. So the team's actively working on states. We're sort of making sure that the way we implement states allows you to build interactive states, build design systems that allow you to scale for, big teams and enterprise requirements. So we're definitely making good progress on states. Stay tuned. The team is definitely focused on that as well. Awesome. We are a couple of minutes away from getting into the portfolio review stuff, but in the meantime, does anyone else have any other questions? This would be a good opportunity. It's the last day of the stream that I'm on, at least. Yeah. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to try and answer them. Chris, looks like Chris had a question. Why did we move fixed position to prototyping mode? So Chris, this is one of the things where when we introduced fixed position, it actually was a prototyping feature because you would only fix something when you're scrolling, and you tend to set those things up while you're building up your prototype. So we decided to move it into prototype mode. That way, the property inspector and design mode is not cluttered with a lot of options. And you will see a lot of more enhancements coming to what properties you can edit in design mode. So this makes a little more space for some of those things in the property inspector for design mode. Looks like we got another question. What about hover? So it's similar to states. We are sort of looking at hover interactions and states together. So that's again in the works, something that the team is working on right now. What was the prototyping animation window that popped up for a second? I'm not sure what that was. Are you referring to this thing? This is exactly what it is. Like, this is how you set up interactions inside of XD in prototype mode. All right. Scrolling. Alex there with his wisdom. Scrolling is an interaction. All right. So don't worry, Alex. We'll also move scrolling into prototyping mode pretty soon once you give me the designs for those. And for those of you who just joined, Alex is actually one of the designers on the XD team. He works with Hillary and the rest of them. And Alex actually partners with me on the prototyping features for XD.
Yeah.
Let's see, selected all, and they look like a processing window.
I don't know.
I'm not sure what I did. Maybe I sneaked a sneak. Selected all.
Accidentally sneaked.
Oh, maybe I did this to copy paste between artboards. I don't know if that was confusing. I just like panned out. Yeah, I'm open to any questions that you all have around XD in specific.
Processing.
Alex had my lunch. That's fine. It looked like a prototyping processing window. Yeah, I'm not sure. We don't actually have any processing window, so I'll probably have to go back and replay this whole live stream and see what exactly popped up during that time. If I figure out, I'm going to come find you and tell you what it was.
Well, cool.
It looks like there's some panic around fonts. What happened there?
So we're about 2 minutes away from jumping into portfolio reviews, so maybe we can just do a quick recap of the stuff we've talked about over the last 3 days. So day one, we talked about creating components and using those across your document and other documents and linking to components, working with other designers on design systems, so how you can collaborate kind of with designer to designer. With that, inviting designers into your document, so you can go and do that up in the share sheet. And then on day two, we looked a little bit more in collaborating with your stakeholders, so creating prototypes, sharing those with stakeholders and getting comments back, and making changes to your prototype and republishing that out to your stakeholders. And then lastly, collaborating with developers.
Yep.
So publishing a design spec, being able to export things for your developer to be able to download and go ahead and use. And then we also took a look at collaborating across the ecosystem. So, using elements from Photoshop, Illustrator, utilizing CC libraries. We also did a few overviews on using responsive resize, on some cool prototyping features. And then earlier today, we took a look at creating presentations and kind of best practices for sharing presentations with stakeholders, and how to set those up.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got all of it, which was impressive.
Plugins.
That was a long... Oh, plugins, yes.
Yeah.
That was a pretty long list of stuff we covered. I hope you all have had a great time across the last 3 days. I did want to call out some breaking news. Naveen figured out where the hamburger icon goes. So it does go to the very first artboard in the file. That's good to know, because now I have to actually go figure out which is my first artboard in this file. I'm sad to report I still can't find my hamburger icon, but I'm glad you found yours at least. All right.
All right. Should we take a look at some portfolios?
Sure. We have one last question. I just wanted to check. So, suggestions for me. James, why don't you reach out to me on Twitter, and I'd love to follow up with you and figure out what the best options are. I think Howard can quickly sort of post my Twitter handle so that you could reach out to me, maybe on a direct message, and then let's chat. All right.
Cool. All right, so we're going to take a look at two portfolios. So, Mohammed, we're going to take a look at yours first. So, brought up your Behance page. The first thing that I really like is the fact that you just have like a really focused portfolio. So I can come in here and just get 3 projects, super clear, and not like super overwhelming. Also get, a little bit more information about you. So I can see that you're an engineering student and a designer. So full stack here. Super cool.
That's impressive.
Links out to some of your other platforms and a little bit about you. It looks like you are living in Morocco. So super cool. All right. So let's take a look at the first project maybe.
Yep.
So it looks like a Spotify app redesign. So my initial reaction is like, okay, so I know what I'm going to look at. It's super clean here. So excited to just dive in. So the first thing is the homepage. So it looks like a lighter UI. I know what Jonathan's first comment is. There's like some blur effects, gradients.
Background blurs. Yes.
Cool. Really easy on the eyes to look at. Nice color palette. As I scroll down, I can see a playlist menu. So here on the right, it looks like you can see which song you're listening to and what's next.
One of the things when I started out my career as a designer, a lot of my personal projects were also redesigns of existing products and services. I think one of the things I learned along the way was whenever you put together a project, which is usually a redesign of an existing product or a service, it's always good to try and maybe summarize what were your pain points and what were you trying to solve differently, because it sort of helps provide a little perspective on what are you trying to actually achieve? Is it just a visual redesign? Is it a specific problem that you were so passionate about that you decided to try and tackle it? And that actually speaks a lot, because as someone, for example, when we see feedback or we see designs from the community saying, hey, I designed a feature for XD, right? It's always super interesting to see some of that stuff. But at the same time, one of the things we all have to be aware of is when we are not working directly on a specific product, we are not fully aware of what are some of the challenges maybe that team faced while designing this. What were some of the trade-offs they had to make, right? So you always have to leave some benefit of doubt that the teams may have made a decision for a specific reason. So that's why I always encourage designers when you want to specifically go solve a problem for an existing product or service, it's always good to maybe take a minute or two or have a little section that says I use this often enough and I keep running into this. I just thought I'll reimagine what that interface could look like or how I could do it in a better way. So that's just some feedback around maybe adding a little more context as to what you were trying to achieve with the redesign. It helps others also understand and see that you're trying to solve a specific problem.
Yeah. So that's a great point. We say this a lot, but as designers, we're storytellers. So in your portfolio, you want to make sure that when someone comes to your project that they understand the story that's coming across. Not just the high fidelity designs, but as Jonathan said, more context to what you were trying to achieve. And a really good way I like to test that is to just hand it off to someone who's not even a designer and have them tell me about the project. But with that said, these visuals are awesome.
Yeah.
It's super cool to see what Spotify might look like in a light UI. Cool. Should we take a look at another project?
Sure.
Okay. Should we do...
Yeah, let's do that one.
Okay. Skynet. About Skynet. Artificial intelligence project that uses a civilian drone to replace a human pilot in performing certain tasks. Cool.
That's interesting.
Cool. So this project, I can already tell you've added some more context that's super helpful for the users. They take a look at your project. I'm not going to read the whole thing to the audience, but
that's actually a really good point, which is, sometimes in your projects, you got to balance out like visuals versus text. And I feel like there are two schools of thought out here, right? Which is some people prefer having, everything documented, like their entire process, how they went about each step. And some are, some just prefer having a very quick summary of things, or maybe even omitting them. To be honest, I think it really depends on the type of project. Personally, for me, let's say if it was just a simple logo redesign, then I tend to skip the whole what is the background. I maybe have a summary, but maybe for a project which is so different that I need to have context of what the goals were, or like who the customer is or what the audience is, then I tend to go more in detail. But that's another interesting thing to keep in mind, like when you're summarizing your projects, like think about as a person who's reading this for the first time, not as the person who actually designed it, but as a person who's reading it. What would I care the most about, right? Would I really want to start reading an entire summary before you show me the designs, or like would I be more excited to see your designs and then if I'm interested, dig more deeper into understanding why you did something in a specific way.
So something we do a lot in presentations too is think about the audience. So if I'm presenting my designs to a bunch of other designers, that might be different than who I'm presenting to stakeholders. And it's the same thing with portfolios. Depending on the job that you're applying to, you may want different information available to the person viewing. But this is super cool because here I can see the logo philosophy if I want to, or I can keep scrolling and go ahead and just see the different elements of it.
Nice.
I love seeing these kind of anatomy pieces. Cool. And then we have the light and dark version, so you can use them on different backgrounds. Always super important to think about. The colors. And some more information about the colors and like what you were trying to convey. That's really nice. I like that you're providing the context here, but it's not like super in your face. You're really letting your visuals talk, and then if I want to read more about it, I can. Nice, and how that logo might be used across, different materials. How it scales on big and small things. Love it.
This is giving me chills because it reminds me when I used to freelance and do print and like bunch of things like this.
Do you miss it?
Yeah, I do miss it sometimes.
I don't actually come from a print background. I actually have an architecture background. So I do like seeing things like in like context of real life. That always brings me back a little bit.
Awesome. All right.
Cool. So,
do we have any more?
Yeah, we've got another portfolio. So here we have
Another Jonathan. All right.
Loveless. Cool last name. Cool. So
I love the header image, by the way.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the coolest ones I've seen on Behance.
Yeah, it's super cool. Okay, so Jonathan, it looks like you're an illustrator and a graphic designer. I've got your website here. Tons of project views, other information. Cool. So now we can take a look at your work. It looks like you've got like a nice breadth of work.
Yep.
And I feel like as an illustrator, like a graphic designer, that totally makes sense to have like...
I want to go for the middle one on the second row.
This one?
Yep.
Stroll to Fire.
I saw the word podcast and I was in.
It's got like that camp vibe.
Yeah, it's got those camp vibes to it. Yeah.
Going with the last 3 days. Financial independence. So Stroll to Fire. Again, here we've got some information about like the colors used and what you were trying to evoke through these logos. I love the color palettes.
Yeah, I love these as stickers.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Cool. Some nice illustrations to go with it. Got like a businessman walking into the mountains.
I love when, designers share like images of the actual sketches versus
Yeah.
taking those images and then again vectorizing
Yeah.
them. Like I actually like to see like the raw work on paper. Like that just, it's nice.
Yeah. We always say this, but work in progress is always like super fun for people to see. It shows your thinking, how you got to where you got. It doesn't always have to be your, high fidelity finished piece. I almost feel like this stuff is more fun to look at sometimes.
Awesome.
Awesome.
So let's see what else we have. Oh, and one of the things is on Behance, you should definitely tag which tools you're using to create these projects. Not only that, it helps in several different ways. One is like, as another user, when I come in and let's look at that one.
The illustration here.
Oh, even the one on the left. Actually, that entire row looks awesome.
Okay.
Let's go with the one you want to go look
Okay.
at first.
I just
Okay.
really like these kind of characters.
Oh yeah,
How
so
awesome this
the
is.
tool really helps because if I for example, when I look at this, I'm like, how did he create it, right? So like the tools help me understand you've used Illustrator or maybe another tool. At the same time, the Behance team also sort of runs a curated gallery of like artwork or just stuff that's created with specific tools. It's a great way of getting your work actually featured in one of those sections. So if you tag the work that you've created with XD or Illustrator or Photoshop, the Behance team reviews a lot of that content. It might just show up in the curated gallery as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We have different versions of him. I love it so much. It's like a work in progress here. Oh, okay. Let's go from the
Ooh.
bottom. Okay, so we have the original.
So maybe that's a
designs.
good tip for him.
Yeah.
Maybe reorder this to
Yeah.
have the sketch on the top.
Yeah.
That's epic.
Moving to digital,
Nice.
adding in some more color, more details,
Shadows and detail.
and then boom.
That's pretty
Love it.
awesome.
I mean, it's cool to see the finished thing, but
Yeah.
then maybe afterwards.
Okay, and then,
reverse
yeah,
it.
that also makes sense,
Yeah.
right? I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All
The
right.
first one.
This one?
I just love image manipulations which are done in Photoshop. Just compositing different stock images and like digital art and like painting on top of that.
Yeah.
That's
I
my
mean, This
favorite.
looks like complete art. It's
Mhm.
awesome. Looks painted.
This actually reminds me of a thing I did a while back actually, which was pretty similar in that sense. If we have some time towards the end,
Yeah.
we'll probably go look at that.
This actually reminds me, there was like an app, and I can't remember what exactly it did, but you'd like had like your own little like island or something, and you could like grow stuff on it, and like it was almost
One
like
of
the
the
new
Facebook
age
games.
new age things of like those they're like those little like pets that you kept alive. You had to like keep your island alive.
Oh my god.
Okay. Do you want to see this one? This was the background image you
Mhm.
loved.
Oh, pretty.
So here he's flipped it. We've got the work in progress, the sketch, and then the digital version of it.
I do want to say that escalated pretty quickly from low fidelity to high fidelity, but that's awesome.
Yeah.
I really like how it's a 2D illustration,
Yeah.
but the whole light effect gives you that 3D feel to it.
Yeah.
It's like a subtle thing, but it makes such a big difference to like your entire illustration.
Yeah. Cool.
Awesome.
All right, maybe we'll look at one more.
Oh, there was a good character one down
Where?
there on the
Oh,
right.
this one?
Yeah.
Does he have underwear on his head? I love it.
I hope it wasn't.
Who's
Oh,
that
it's just
man?
bandages.
Oh, who's hurt? Love it. No, he has a plunger in his hand.
Well, then that could be an underwear on his head. You never know.
I love it. It's like this backwards superhero. Cool.
Nice.
Cool. So there's
Awesome.
actually a little bit of context here that I'm just noticing. So, he said he's got his blue sketch here. He's done this one in ink.
Oh, okay.
And then here we've done the flat color layer, but as Jonathan said, it would be cool to know, what program you did it in.
Yeah.
And then the cover page.
That man. Who's that? It's so funny when you say it out loud. Who is that man?
I think here it says Instagram logo animation, so maybe we can take one more look.
Let's look at that.
Got an animation. Cool.
Oh, play that again. I missed
Yeah.
it.
So it's just like the intro video, it seems like.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
You could do that with XD as well.
Yeah.
I wonder which tool you used. Oh, it's not there in it?
No.
See, something like this makes me very curious. Like, how did someone achieve that effect, right? And that's why tagging the tools you use helps quite often, just for someone else to get a sense of it.
Yeah. Oh, here's an app thing. Okay. Sync your calendars to one spot with the option to make an event as solo or a couples event. Okay, so it's a prototype introducing MoneyBee app concept. What is MoneyBee? So we've got a lifestyle app. Save receipts, settle accounts, pay your bill. So you can take a picture of your bill and then also sync your calendars. Now I'm more wondering what time a joint event is. Okay, so this is cool. So if you have an event with like a bunch of people, you can schedule it, and then you can also kind of settle up your bills and stuff at the end of it, and then have conversations about the event. So it's kind of like just like a group event app. That's cool. I like this. It is a little hard to follow in a video. I feel like it could go fast. You may have to watch it like multiple times. That's one of the struggles with a video is like if you miss something, and if it's like a scrollable page, someone can like take their time and go through it. But I love seeing the animation that you've done, so maybe you could have both. That could be an option.
Yeah.
But the visuals are super nice.
Cool.
Cool.
So do we have anything more? Or is that a wrap?
I think, unless we want to look at any more projects. Is there any other ones on here? Maybe this app real quick.
Okay.
Cool. So we've got an overview here.
Do have to say
Looks
it's a
like-
little hard to read the text on this one.
Yeah, it looks like a story. It might be nice to have like a header just to know, what I'm looking at immediately when I open it up. And then as I scroll, I've got the logo, so it looks like some branding for the app. Here, I love the use of like breaking down that logo for everyone. Yeah, it would actually be cool to see some of these screens blown up and be able to like dive a little bit more into what the screens are doing and like what the app is.
Yep.
But yeah, overall super cool. Thank you for sharing. All right.
Awesome. So I hope you all had fun. I enjoyed myself for the last 3 days. A lot of great questions. We covered a lot of different prototyping design features. It was fun going through some of the work that you all have been doing with XD, as well as reviewing some portfolios. If you all have any questions, you all know where to find me on Twitter. Drop me a tweet. I'll try and respond to them. If not, you have feature requests, go to uservoice.com, upvote them, add your ideas out there. The team's always looking at that for feedback as we prioritize our roadmap. But hope you guys had a great time, y'all enjoyed yourselves, and definitely tune in for more live streams. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.